Hello everyone, this is Victor from the Modern Gaffa, and here are all of the books that I read in February 2018. First up is Arlo Finch in the Valley of Fire by John August. I wrote a full review of this, but it's not published yet. It's totally ready, it's edited, I just need to add like a picture, and then for some reason I've been delaying it. I've had other stuff to post. I've been following this book's creation since it was announced on John August's podcast. For those who don't know him, he is a screenwriter. He wrote Big Fish and Corpse Bride and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Arlo Finch is based on his childhood experiences growing up in the Boy Scouts. It's about a kid named Arlo Finch who moves to a mountain town in Colorado, and he joins the local scouting group and discovers that Boy Scouts isn't just typical scouting stuff. There's also like magic and monsters. So while he's learning like knots and, typical wilderness stuff, he's also learning how to cast magic spells and how to fight monsters and that kind of thing. It's really good. It's technically middle grade, but it feels like weirdly mature and adult and strange in some scenes. There's a car crash in one chapter, and as someone who's been in a car crash, it is very realistic and on the nose, and it totally gets it right. This is the first book in a trilogy, and I'm really excited for it. And look at this cover. It is just beautiful. We got Arlo standing in the icy mountains, but there's like a portal to the Fireland. It's really good, really eerie, very original concept. Boy Scouts fighting monsters. Really good. You should absolutely check it out. Next up is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. This is something I know they made a movie about a few years ago, and I don't think I ever saw trailers or anything, but I kind of always got the vibe that it was it looks like the Spiderwick Chronicles and a series of unfortunate events. So I guess I thought it was kind of that, but with X-Men. But this is super young adult. It's not quite R-rated. There's very few four-letter words, but there's some. It's very in your mind, super deep, messed up, dark stuff. This kid witnesses his grandfather's death, and it turns out that his grandfather is not quite the perfect man he thought he was, and so he kind of follows the trail to find answers about his grandpa, and that leads him to this home. I can't really talk about it at all because I personally had no idea what I was getting into. I thought it was going to be again, little British kids X-Men. It does get a little X-Men-y towards the end, but the majority of it is this beautiful story about... I really can't say anything about it. There's too much. It's spoiled. If you've never read it, you have to. One really cool thing about the book is that there's these photographs intercut in certain scenes. Photographs are a big part of the story. I kind of thought they were all staged and produced specifically for this book, but at the end there's a story about how they're all real pictures that they found in yard sales and old photo albums and stuff, and they kind of wrote the story around it. So it's really good. Apparently there's more. I really want to get them, and I can't tell you how much I love this book. The last physical book I have is also the only manga I read this month, and it is Fire Force, Volume 1. This was in the Manga Spice Cafe box that I got for last month. It's really good. It's really weird. It takes place in a world where spontaneous human combustion is a really big deal. Not only is it a bigger deal than it is in our world, when you turn into fire, you don't just explode, you turn into a fire demon monster. And so the Fire Force is kind of a task force that goes around not hunting, but killing, putting fire people out of their misery after they've transformed. All the main characters can control fire in different degrees, which is really cool because typically when you see elemental magic, it's there's the fire guy and the water guy. Seeing an entire universe where most of the main characters are different kinds of fire magic users, that's really interesting. It's really funny, it's really strange and different. It's from the creator of Soul Eater, which I've never seen or read, but I like it. Check it out. As some of you probably know, I use an app called Hoopla that I'm a big supporter of. It's an app that you can register through your local library and download media, so many a month. My library lets me get 10 items a month. I always use it on comics. I never get anything else. This month, because Peculiar Children and Arlo Finch kind of overtook my reading, I think I only downloaded 2 or 3 books this month. But I downloaded a bunch of stuff at the end of the month that rolls over into March. Which I'll talk about at the end of this month because it's March 2nd and I've already finished all 8 of those books. This month I read classic, super old school X-Men comics. I read Dark Phoenix and Days of Future Past. I loved them both. I think I liked Dark Phoenix a little better. It's basically trade collections, so Dark Phoenix was like 8 to 10-ish chapters. The first arc is kind of the pre-Dark Phoenix stuff. There's clues leading up to it about how Dark Phoenix is going to Dark Phoenix, you know. That's all very cool, and then the main story where she becomes the Dark Phoenix is really cool and interesting, and we just kind of see her go crazy, and everyone is like, oh my god, we have to stop her, what do we do? The very last chapter is kind of lame. They all just kind of come together, and the alien coalition is like, we are going to kill her unless you can beat our army of super people. And I'm like, this is what we're doing? But it's still a really good story. I really love it. The other one, Days of Future Past, is kind of just a collection of random stories, 2 of which are Days of Future Past. Everything else is just kind of unrelated. Wolverine and Nightcrawler go north to fight a werewolf, I guess. The first chapter of the Days of Future Past collection is actually Jean Grey's funeral, post Dark Phoenix, which I think is a great starting point for fans who want to get into classic X-Men, because it details everything from the first day that Scott arrived at the Xavier Institute, and it goes through every beat of all the different X-Men stories leading up to Jean Grey's death. That part's really cool, and Days of Future Past, it's okay, but it's only 2 chapters and there's not a whole lot to it. One thing I really love about these classic comics, though, is how there's kind of like novel-esque prose in the descriptions. Like full-on entire paragraphs, every panel just overly written with like beautiful words, like right into the minds of the characters and the situation and the world. That stuff's beautiful. Characters also like overly explain the science of what's happening, like in the split of a moment. Like, somebody will punch Colossus or like shoot a laser at him, and he'll be like, in his thought bubble, he'll be like, oh no, they came at me with a positron laser. Luckily I was able to engage my super tough skin at the last moment, and the laser bounced off of me magnetically. And it's just like, what are you were thinking all of this super science technobabble in the 2 seconds it takes you to get shot. I also read Infinity Gauntlet, which is the precursor to Infinity War. I started reading Infinity War and I didn't like it that much. Infinity Gauntlet, though, is a little more interesting, a little more fun. This is from the 90s. The X-Men stuff I talked about is from the 80s, so the prose stuff is still there, but it's kind of on its way out. But we are getting into the era where there's a lot of just dialogue and characters sitting around talking. I know it's not going to be exactly like the upcoming movie, but it's so weird to me that the entire plot is basically Thanos is really in love with Lady Death, and Mephisto is his wingman. There's like 20 pages of just that. But it's really good. There is eventually a big team up of a lot of superheroes. The big main characters are Silver Surfer and Adam Warlock, who are not going to be in the movie, so it's interesting to see how that'll play out. But again, this is the Infinity Gauntlet. Infinity War is a different comic that I didn't really read, but Adam Warlock and Silver Surfer are big characters in that one too, I'm sure, so I don't know how that's going to work. I also read 2 graphic novels from Image Comics. One is called Firebug, which starts off, it's the origin of a fire goddess, like in an island, like a, I don't even know what kind of culture it's, I don't know. But there's a fire god in like a volcano. And it jumps to modern day, where this fire goddess is still a thing, and every time she dies, her daughter gains her powers, and so it's about a rogue goddess who's joining like a rebel cult. A lot of political intrigue and just weird kind of messiah storyline and stuff like that. The tropical island, futuristic, modern, kind of old school. It's weird, the production design, I guess. The imagery is very well designed and very interesting. And whenever there's fire in a panel, the fire is beautifully drawn. They really put a lot of work into that fire. I also read Scales and Scoundrels Volume 1, which is sort of a fantasy dungeon crawler. It reminded me a lot of Magi, the anime about Aladdin and Alibaba. It follows a girl who is heavily implied to be a dragon in human form. She meets up with a traveling party, and they go on a mission to she teams up with a prince and the prince's bodyguard who doesn't trust her, and they meet a dwarf girl, and they're just exploring dungeons and going on adventures, and it's a lot of fun. It's funny, it's weird. If you like fantasy Dungeons and Dragons type stuff, you should definitely check it out. Yeah, that's everything I read this month. Like I said, I didn't read a whole lot of comics, but I downloaded the Hoopla comics that I had not spent at the end of the month, and I already read all of them in the past 2 days of March. So expect a big what did I read at the end of March, because I'm still gonna read more comics. Yeah, let me know what you read in the comments below, and have a good one.